Faith and religion, for some, they're the same. For others, quite different. All this week, WSBT 22 is exploring what faith looks like in our area.
Now, WSBT 22's Patrick Roth is here. And Patrick, millennials are unlike any other generation when it comes to their approach to religion and faith.
Yeah, Rick, according to a survey by Pew Research last year, no other generation is as skeptical of organized religion as millennials. But that's not to say they don't believe in anything. Like a lot of churches, Sunday morning is a busy day at Trinity United Methodist Church in Plymouth. A lot of people of all ages are in the pews. But a close look shows that one group isn't represented as others. Young people, specifically millennials. It's a similar story here at Christ the King Parish in South Bend.
I think what's interesting is that when looking at the millennials that are at Mass, they're really active in the parish community. I think part of that is there's not a cultural obligation to feel that they have to come to Mass.
A similar story is playing out at churches all across the country. Pew Research shows that less than 30% of millennials go to church on a weekly basis. That's less than baby boomers and even Generation X. But that's not to say that millennials aren't necessarily spiritual or aren't looking for answers.
I would say, unlike other generations, it's been my experience, they're much more unsettled if they can't live out what they're thinking about. So ideas are only real and justified if they have some sort of purpose in everyday life.
One of the major differences is where millennials find that sense of purpose. More than 80% of millennials say they believe in God, which is about the same as previous generations. But the major difference is in how millennials view organized religion. Fewer than 45% of millennials say religion is important in their daily lives.
We've seen the culture wars, that the institutional church has been very involved in culture wars, political fighting, and sometimes Jesus is identified as a certain political party, and that really turns millennials off. They're not interested in those sorts of things.
In a general sense, I think religion has gotten a bad name. People are fine being spiritual, but religion is, as a term, has become something that people don't necessarily want to readily associate themselves with.
While a majority of millennials are at least skeptical of organized religion, that doesn't mean they view it as something that's inherently bad either.
One of the unique things about a church, whether it's a Methodist one or really any kind of faith community, is it's supposed to be a community that brings all kinds of different people together.
I think there's a lot of promise there. I just think that there's also a desire and a need to kind of think differently about how we reach out to people and how we embrace people within the church.
For pastors and other people within the church, millennials give them a chance to show what it means to live a life of faith.
Really take people, these millennials who are choosing to come, to really, you can actually go much deeper and explore things much more in depth than if it's people who are really not interested, they're only there.
One of the things I love about the millennials is they hold our feet to the fire and they say, hey, you say this, but are you going to live it out? And so I actually love that about millennials, and I think it's a very positive thing for the church that they really encourage us to live out what we say we believe.
Now, some of the people I spoke to said that they think some of the reasoning behind millennials' faith is at least in part their age. People in their 20s tend to be less religious than most, but they point out that millennials are different than other generations. They tend to question things a little bit more than previous generations have.
It's a fascinating story that you've put together. Is there a religion or a sect that sort of bucks the trend when it comes to millennials?
That study by Pew Research last year showed that people of every age are actually less religious now than they were a few years ago. And in fact, the largest growing sect is a group called the Nuns, meaning they're not a part of any organized religion, not the Catholic,
No, right.
not sisters.
N-O-N-E.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I can't spell quickly.
And as we heard in your piece, also, it's the fact that a lot of millennials think it's political, that religion
yeah,
is political.
and it's interesting to see the sort of dynamic that's going out there. But really, that the Nuns is the fastest growing thing, and that's something that actually WSBT 22 Suzanne Spencer has been looking into, and she'll be reporting on that later this week.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right,
Patrick.
looking forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you. Going to church without leaving the house. Now, people are turning their living rooms into a worship space.
They are. WSBT 22's Diane Daniels continues our week-long focus on how more of your neighbors are finding faith.
It says in the Bible that where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. Fans of home church worship say that is the model upon which their movement is founded. When we think of church, this is what many of us think of: tradition and pageantry. Or the enthusiasm of an organized choir. Let it shine, let it shine. Or perhaps a highly produced gospel rock number at a large venue like Granger Community Church.
That's right. I was like, you look so familiar.
Welcome to the start of home church. 7 people in Bremen gathering round the kitchen to satisfy their hunger.
We just pray, Lord, that everything that we say and do is honoring to you.
And then they satisfy their souls. Sitting around this room on a Wednesday night, this is church for most of these people. No pastor, no pews, but plenty of prayer.
We just like the homey feel of meeting together in a home, and it also makes you more responsible for your walk with God, because you're not relying just on a pastor.
They still have music and sing at this home church. It's just to the tune of what's playing on a smartphone. The group is non-denominational. Some have a missionary church background. Others were brought up Baptist or Methodist. They're from all walks of life, and they're all here for their own reasons.
I was able to see the positives, obviously, of corporate worship and being able to meet in larger groups. And I was also able to see, okay, asking myself, especially in my 20s, okay, why are so many of my peers starting to leave the church, and what is it that they're looking for? What is it maybe that they feel like is maybe corrupted in any way?
It makes us a lot more accountable to our group here. We're not just showing up on a Sunday hearing a pastor preach.
Bethel College Associate Professor of Religion John Dendu has worked with home church groups for years.
In some sense, people are saying we're going back to the way church was originally conceived and started way back in the first couple centuries of the church.
Now preach to church.
And there's no need to worry about laughing out loud at this church service.
I think what's cool about this is that God can meet us anywhere, and you don't have to be in a church or sitting in a pew to hear God's voice and to be ministered to. So I think that's a big thing in home church is
Now back to GCC and its connection to the home church movement. Today it may have thousands of members, but it started as a home church with just 5 people meeting in a living room back in 1986. Some estimates put the number of home churches in the U.S. in the tens of thousands. And as our religious landscape continues to change and become less traditional, it's a movement most agree is here to stay. Diane Daniels, WSBT 22 News.
People who say that they're done with religion, they're called nuns and duns.
Yeah, we're talking about N-O-N-E-S. WSBT 22's Suzanne Spencer is here. And Suzanne, this is a rapidly growing group of people.
There are more nuns than Catholics or evangelical Protestants in the country, 2 religions that are dropping in numbers. Now, according to a recent Pew study, 36 million people identify as religiously unaffiliated. That was in 2007. That number jumped to more than 55 million people in 2014. Many of those people call themselves nuns. Now, that's more than 20% of the American population and counting.
The beat, the sound, the strokes. The Sucker Punch Band is known for their tunes.
It's just the rhythm, the groove. It's syncing up with 4 other human beings.
But guitarist Kevin Chodzinski strums his own tune. His band practices at a Berrien County church, but you won't find Kevin Chodzinski anywhere near religion.
Are you a nun or are you a dun? What do you identify with?
I'm both, actually. I'm a nun and a dun. I was brought up Polish Catholic, and now I'm not Polish Catholic. I'm nun and dun.
At 30, he began researching. Then he began questioning. Now at 44, Chudzinski said he knew religion wasn't for him.
I was probably for 2 or 3 years feeling that way, but not willing to tell anybody, just because I know the stigma attached to it.
He's one of 19 million Americans who identify as a nun. That's what Notre Dame political science professor Jeff Lehman is on sabbatical studying.
What are nuns?
There's a pretty wide variation in the kind of people who might be part of that group.
In a Pew Research study, a nun can be an atheist, an agnostic, religious, or unreligious. It could be those who identify as nothing in particular, or even that religion is somewhat important to them. Lehman says nuns are known for moving in and out of being a nun.
Who here, before you were coming to Vineyard, would have considered yourself either a nun or a dun?
But finding that nun population is what the Vineyard Church in Mishawaka is trying to do.
Did you identify as a nun or dun?
I was a dun, clearly a dun.
27-year-old Zach Lesh grew up Catholic. He said he felt he was never plugged in. The same for 22-year-old Boston Bays. Friends both brought them to the Vineyard.
Sometimes you get really comfortable living like the way you are used to living, but you don't know how much more is like out there.
For them, the out there was here, a church that has grown rapidly with those who have fallen away from other faiths. The key, relationships.
That's probably the main reason I come to this church, is because I have made so many friends, and you really can get involved easily.
But unlike Bays, many other people, age aside, aren't connecting with religion. From 2007 to 2014, the nun population grew across all generations in a Pew study. 2% of the silent generation, a 3% rise in the baby boomers, a 4% rise in Generation X, and the older millennial generation saw a 9% rise. All of those people identifying as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular.
The congregation was established in 1905. But
dealing with that drop in numbers is something Rabbi Karen Campanez at Temple Bethel is also dealing with, but their approach is different than the Vineyards.
Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. In other words, we don't go out and seek members or people to join us. However, if people would like to join us, then they're certainly welcome.
Because they don't actively seek members, Rabbi Campanez says they focus on maintaining the population that they do have. She says many of whom are aging. A Pew Research study says that the rise of nuns could be due to declining religiosity, generational replacement, or even a relabeling of a group of people that's already been around. But the record that makes up Kevin Chudzinski's song isn't about being spiritual or a deity or an afterlife.
What do you think people need to know about nuns and duns?
We're just regular people that go to work, have kids, and enjoy music and arts and whatever else. There's nothing spooky about us. We're just not buying what they're selling.
Religion or not, a decision each one of us has to make.
We're seeing a drop in religious behavior altogether. More people say religion is not important in their life. We're seeing a 57% in 2007. That's up to 65% in 2014. Now, along with that, 56% of people said that they've never prayed in 2007. That number jumping up to 62% in 2014. Now, another big growth that we're seeing, those people who don't believe in God at all. That number, 22% in 2007, jumping to 33% in 2014. Now, a group of professors at Notre Dame believe they know why this trend is happening. Rick, we've got their take on this story on our WSBT mobile app.
Suzanne, very interesting story. Thank you. In the current political season, there's a lot of talk about religion and what divides us. Now, some groups and individuals in our community are instead focusing on the similarities.
Tonight, we continue our in-depth look at religion and finding faith. WSBT 22's Zach Crenshaw is here. And Zach, you talked with people who intentionally work with other religions.
And they're the first to admit it's not something that always happens naturally. Oftentimes, we associate with people who are similar to us, which includes having the same religious beliefs. For some, though, understanding another person's faith teaches them a lot about themselves.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
There is no doubt that millions of people are suffering from the rise of radical Islamic terrorism. Christians are suffering, Jews are suffering.
It's a common political message this campaign season, one that has become divisive. Opponents say it increases fear and rejection of certain religions, sometimes leading to action.
This lady was talking about my God. She was saying he is there. Do not touch me!
It's not a good feeling to hear sometimes what I hear on TV.
Making minorities live in fear and in discomfort, to say the least.
Both Syed Aftab and Imam Musa are Muslims. They're also on the board for a charity called Children of Abraham.
Our mission is simply to provide relief to clinics and hospitals that treat the poorest of the poor at no charge.
The volunteer-only group has shipped nearly $500 million worth of medical supplies all over the world. And they don't choose people based on religion, because they aren't worried about it themselves.
So it's Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, and Jewish.
Every 2 years, we switch the presidency between the church, the mosque, and the synagogue.
We interviewed some of the charity's board at Grace United Methodist Church in South Bend, where co-founder David Schrader is the senior pastor. I asked them what effect working with and learning about other religions has on their own faith.
Enriches you, confirms your belief.
You come into more and more realization that the foundation is the same. There might be a little bit of interpretation difference, rituals could be different, but the foundations are the same.
It enhances my Catholic faith.
It deepens my faith by making me realize that there is something that calls to the heart of all people.
The charity brings the board members together, but they admit this type of relationship doesn't usually happen naturally.
This is one of few times when I interact with people from different faith and see they have the same concerns, same feelings, and same emotions as me.
The interaction is called interfaith dialogue.
The important reason for dialogue is also to affirm your own identity.
Notre Dame professor Rashid Omar is an expert on the topic.
And by me reaching out to you, I learn more about myself.
Regardless of how someone prays, what they wear, or the name they call God, these board members say it's important to treat everyone with respect, focusing on similarities as much as differences.
I want people to see that there is love and compassion and goodness in people regardless of their religious background.
Interfaith or interreligious dialogue is not a luxury, it's not an optional, it's not an extra, it is an essential.
As you heard, it may not be easy engaging with people of different faiths. Professor Omar says his challenge is for others to actively get outside their comfort zone. And when you see someone who looks differently than you in a waiting room, on the bus, in the cafeteria, wherever, make an effort to get to know them. It doesn't have to be a religious conversation. Jennifer, just learning about someone, he says, is a step in the right direction.
All right, Zach, thanks very much for that.
It has close to 40 million listeners a week. Are you one of them?
Yeah, in the final part of our Finding Faith series, WSBT 22's Danielle Kennedy explores Christian radio. Danielle, these stations are helping people find faith.
They are, Jennifer, and in a variety of formats, everything from gospel to contemporary Christian. In northern Indiana and southwestern Michigan, Christian radio has its fans. DJs I spoke with say people are tuning in to find something more than just music.
I don't know how your day began. Perhaps something has changed for you. With great music on the way, positive hit music, Pulse FM.
When Kimberly Ann Bonds left her job DJing at a top 40 station.
I've been in Christian radio for, I want to say, 27 years. And since I'm only 30, that's saying a lot.
The 48-year-old learned a new definition of music.
I have never experienced anything like the type of music that we play. I want to be guilty. If guilty means I'm guilty of being there for you.
It's almost like they were made for each other.
Christian radio says, you know what? God gets it. He understands it. We do too. And here's the answer. Here's the solution. Here's the hope. Here's the joy.
And here's her chance to share it.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for requesting that song today.
There are 53 radio stations in our area. A quarter of those are Christian radio.
Good morning, Doug and Cody with you.
Welcome back to the morning show.
Including a song that's almost as hot. Sometimes I call this region a kind of a northern Bible belt or Bible bubble.
Doug Moore, a morning show host and DJ with WFRN in Elkhart, would know.
Let's see what the listeners are up to.
He grew up here listening to Christian music and has been on the air with WFRN for almost 20 years.
This region is blessed with a legacy and a history of faith. And there's more than one stream. There's the beautiful streams of Notre Dame and the Catholic history. And then there's the Mennonite history in parts of Michiana, which is very strong.
WFRN has been around for more than 60 years. Doug believes Christian radio is growing, especially in the last decade.
As the world's kind of coming unraveled, I think people are turning to faith more. People are saying, I need something stronger and deeper and more long-lasting than what the nightly news has. So they're turning to, in some cases, Christian radio.
And artists are responding. Bands like Casting Crowns, Big Daddy Weave, and Brandon Heath have all tapped into the Billboard Top 200. And then there are concerts like World Pulse Festival at Notre Dame.
You're laughing, dancing, crying because you're moved. Lives are changed. Lives are always changed. The testimonies will come in for weeks and weeks after a World Pulse Festival.
Christian artists are doing a really good job of knowing that they need to come out with something that is different. Something that when somebody listens to it, they go, oh wow, this is interesting. I've never heard anything like this before. Let's see how this goes.
Sometimes you'll hear Cody Collier co-hosting the morning show with Doug here at WFRN. Other times you'll see him neatly photographed on album covers.
This is the uprising.
I like to say that I'm an artist, and my mediums are faith, family, and love. What I write about, what the artists on WFRN are singing about, you know, those aren't new experiences. Those are things that people go through every day.
Maybe calling into the studios is right for you.
Even those playing the music.
I was sharing something personal from my life, a struggle that I had been through, and I answered the phone, and this sweet little tiny voice started talking, and then she burst out in tears. And you just love these folks. You just love them. So here's the number. And they listen to you every day. So listen, they think of you as a most intimate friend, and they should. And we should never let them down.
What is it that we can do to help?
While secular music artists have shifted their sales to digital platforms, Christian artists continue to make most of their money on CD sales. The Music Business Association says Christian and gospel music accounted for almost 7% of all music sales in 2014. Jennifer, that's more albums sold than Latin and jazz combined.
Wow, Danielle, thanks very much. And if you missed any of our Finding Faith Week stories, you can watch them online. Just head to our website, WSBT.com, and click on Finding Faith in the trending bar.